with this. So
Yes, absolutely. Okay, it says it's connecting. So hard to know when it actually begins, but
yeah, you said it was
anyway.
like that delay the last time. So
I know last time I waited too long. You have the awkward thing. Other times I don't wait long enough.
oh,
Anyway,
it says we're
hello
live.
everyone. I see live people coming on. Glad to have you with us. Welcome to our first of an experimental, you know, pop culture pastors hour. And Ed, you already are wielding your purple lightsaber. Tell me about the color. Is that important for you?
Mace Windu. So
Ah, yes.
yeah,
Got it.
even though Andor is Jedi less,
Yes.
yeah,
Right,
but
right.
yeah, we are a few days away from May the Fourth be with you. So
May the 4th be
yeah,
with us.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Well, it's good to see people joining us. Ed and I and many others have just been totally blown away by season 2 of Andor, just as we were season 1. So we wanted to get a chance to chat about it and to talk about it from our perspective as pastors, as writers, as spiritual leaders. There's a lot of really
and pop
rich.
culture geeks.
Of course, I mean, that's a given.
Yeah.
So the just really rich themes, and for those of you who are joining us, we hope that you have been watching. What we're gonna talk about today are just I mean, anything from season 1 is fair game, as well as season 2, the first 3 episodes. So, episodes 4 through 6 dropped last night, but as you can see, I am at the beach, and Ed is, living his life. So neither of us
Ooh.
have watched 4 through
Although I'm
6
watching
yet.
tonight. I am
Yeah.
watching tonight. So
We'll see whether I can get anyone to watch with me. Otherwise, I will wait and watch with my husband when I get home from preacher camp later in the week. But what we thought we would do is we have not prepared, but I asked each of us, let's each just bring 2 nuggets of something that we want to just chew on and not just talk about what is happening in the show, but what kind of meaning we bring to it. What are we thinking about, kind of thematically and from a spiritual justice, faith perspective, any of those things. And so we're just going to bounce back and forth and with those things. So anything else that we need to say by way of introduction? I
I
think
don't
that's the
think
main
so.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
All
mean,
right.
you got the spoiler part in there, so
Yeah,
that's
that's right. That's the important piece.
yeah.
So the first thing I wanted to bring to you is thinking a lot about the role of women in this show, and especially I'm thinking about a friend who sort of dips in and out of Star Wars sometimes because she's like, I just don't know, I don't love the way their treatment of women. I have encouraged her to watch this show because we have some really not just strong women, but we have really complex characters for people to dip into. But here's a dynamic that I've wanted to talk to someone about, and I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it in the discourse that I've read and such. And it kind of started in season 1, but I see it a little in season 2, is let's think specifically about the relationship between Vel and Cinta. And I want to apply not just a kind of gender overlay, but also a racial one and a class narrative, right? So we don't know much about Cinta's backstory except that I think her family was killed by the Empire. So she has this kind of personal motivation to fight back. Vel also is committed to the cause of the rebellion, but she also comes from a much more privileged kind of upbringing. And especially in season 1, you have differing sense of commitment. Cinta is like, the rebellion is number 1. This is our priority. And Vel is a little like, well, what about us? Can't we kind of remember what we're fighting for and give our relationship some breathing space? And I think, Cinta says the rebellion comes first and we take what's left. And I think about this a lot, and I think you see some of it in Mon Mothma's character too, of how committed am I to this, and can I be committed but still pull away when I want to? And that is such a function of privilege, right? To make the choice, how in am I going to be in this fight? and we see in the first 3 episodes of season 2, Mon Mothma kind of realizing, "No, this is going to be all-consuming." Um, and and I kinda wanna, port this over to kind of modern life and myself as, seeing a lot of, as a kind of white woman of certain privilege, I have the ability to decide how far I'm going to lean into the cause of justice because I have all these privileges that can kind of bolster me and keep me, um, and insulate me from the consequences of some of the worst injustices that happen in our world. So I have seen it really as a critique of race and class and the kind of ways that we can dip in and out of that. Anyway, didn't know if you had any thoughts about that or,
So I hadn't I hadn't thought about in the racial and class part necessarily as much as, and we'll kind of get into this with my part, was just sort of like what is the cost of being a
Mm,
part of this just in
mhm,
general.
yeah.
Um, but to stay, Marianne, with what you were just bringing up, I wondered in the scene where right before Mon Mothma and her daughter go out,
Mhm.
and Mon tells her basically, we can walk away from this.
Yeah, yeah.
I wondered how much was it just simply a we can walk away just from the wedding,
Mhm.
or was it also
Mm,
a what, we can just get away from all of this,
yeah.
everything, because of everything that she had sacrificed, of her family in her
Mhm.
fight to that
Yeah,
point, and there's more to come, I'm sure.
right.
Um, but I thought about that of like, again, kind of that choice of who could do that. She has the
Mhm.
wealth, she has the power, she has,
Yeah.
to just say, you know what, I'm done. I'm done.
Mhm.
I'm going to step out.
Right.
Um, so, um, yes, I think that was another piece to that
Mhm.
um, I hadn't actually seen explored, and it just popped into my head as we
Yeah,
were just talking just now.
right. Yeah, it
Yeah.
reminds me of, for those of you who wanna hear even more about this, I had a podcast episode that came out last week that was actually recorded after season 1, which was 2 years ago, of just a couple of interviews with people that friends of mine, and we got to talking about Andor and this idea of hope. And sometimes hope can be maladaptive in the sense of it keeps us kind of in our current status quo because we don't want to lose what we have. And sometimes what actually motivates us to act is desperation, right? When you have nothing left to lose, that's when you will take action. And it's not really about whether you feel hopeful that it'll work out or not. It's just like, well, I've got nothing left to lose, so I have to go all in. And I feel
Hmm.
like Cinta kind of has that. It's like I've lost everything, and you want me to kind of get into this sort of domestic, like we're just going to be a couple who occasionally dabbles in rebellion activities, and she's like, no, this is my life. And I
Hmm.
think Mon is at that same, and people have said like this season is going to be about her, like she may lose everything, like
Hmm.
she's going, it looks like she's lost her relationship with her daughter because her daughter's like, what are you talking about? I'm going through with this wedding.
Hmm.
And really, what does Mon expect gonna happen, if
Hmm.
she if they do walk away? Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, I love your question, I hadn't thought about that. What is she really saying we can walk away from? The
Hmm.
wedding or the rebellion?
Hmm.
She
Hmm.
feels very naive, I guess, and I think about that as kind of a critique of, I we've been laughing here at this gathering. Somebody passed around the little meme that says, "Joy is an act of resistance," says white woman who has never engaged in any actual resistance. You know, like the idea that like what are we willing to give up? So
Hmm. Hmm.
anyway, that was just
Hmm.
thinking about the gender and class dynamics and how smart the show is to offer up different ways of thinking about that and how we use the privilege that we have.
Mhm.
So for those who are just joining us, we are talking about Andor season 2, and so I offered my own little nugget here, so I'm gonna hop it over to Ed, see what you've got.
Yeah. Can I and this has potential for awkward. Um, Kind of staying on the question of women in Star Wars.
Yeah, sure.
Um, the whole thing with Bix in
Mm,
this episode.
yeah.
Um, and this is weird. This isn't actually one of the things that I kind of noted out, but I so being white male, etc.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful. One of my son wrote this whole lengthy diatribe or treatise on the first 3 episodes. By the way, he texted me this morning, and his comment was, "Holy hell, episodes 4 to 6 are incredible." So that's all I know.
Yay!
So
Can't
to
wait,
which
can't wait.
my wife and I both replied, "No spoilers." So
Yes. Keep your
and
priorities straight.
that's right, that's right. Um, so there's not even a good morning. It was just that. It was like so. But with Bix, like when we first see Bix in the episode, she's having this dream,
Mhm,
and um, that is a nightmare, calling back to the torture that she underwent in the end of
mhm,
the previous season. And and then we get to the kind of present day, so to speak, that has this creep of an imperial officer who, from the moment you first see him, you know what is
yeah.
about, what is coming.
Props to that
And
actor.
yeah, I
Really
would never want
awful.
to play that
Yeah,
role.
yeah.
But anyhow, sorry, my daughter just popped on and just texted me, "Ooh, live video with lightsaber." So sorry,
Yes.
squirrel. Um, but anyway, then we come to when she actually is attacked,
Yeah.
and you get this thing where she doesn't need to be rescued. It
Mhm,
isn't Cassian showing up at the last minute or any of the others showing up. That she's the one who does it.
mhm,
And one thing I hope I go back and forth of how I feel about this. Of like, on the one hand, I saw that as like her and like reclaiming her power, reclaiming her body
mhm,
that had been violated in the last
mhm.
episode,
Yep.
primarily her mind. At least that's what we were
Yeah.
shown.
Yeah.
But here is her reclaiming her body, her strength, um, in fighting this guy off, and then
Mhm.
actually killing the other guy too.
Yeah.
But um, I kind of one thing I hope is that it not that I want Bix to keep suffering, but
Mhm.
I also hope it isn't just simply that simple. Like all of a sudden that erases all the trauma of what she had to go through before.
Yes. Love that.
Um,
Yeah.
but that it is that there was that moment of like, no, I am not only I'm not just the victim of my trauma. I have
Mhm.
power, I have strength, I have agency. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, so that was and also so my son wrote this brilliant, I think, piece about sexual violence in Star Wars and how it's been
Mm.
sort of this weird kind of subtext that's never really spoken about. So Leia and
Mhm.
Return of the Jedi,
Yep.
some of the storylines in the Clone Wars and so forth. Um, but here you actually have the word rape that's meant
Mhm.
said.
Yeah.
You have all of that, and I actually said to Amy, my wife, as we were watching, I'm like, "Is Star Wars going there?" Like,
Mhm.
yeah. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I don't know if you want to respond to that, but that was
Yeah.
that was another piece of just in terms of the gender sides of
Right.
things in that
Yeah.
episode.
That's what makes it so rich, this show, is that the universe is the Star Wars universe, but it is really talking and showing the cost of war, those power imbalances, and that this is the cost, of being under this oppressive system. Couple things. One is that, well, 3. One is that the first thing we see is that she's had this dream, in the early part of this arc, and you remember Dr. Gorst and everything she went through, and I turned to Robert and I said, "This is a trauma-informed Star Wars," like, they are actually acknowledging that it's not just over. Um, the second thing that kind of echoes that is, there's a moment when they're kind of I mean, like, she's fighting him and she's trying to get away and scrambling and stuff. And there's a moment, I want to go back and watch it, where she is kind of crouched on the floor and he's across the room, and there's a look on her face that is the same expression as when she was being tortured by Dr. Gorst in season 1. She looks disheveled, of course, but, like, there's this vacant kind of, and I wonder if that's something the actress deliberately did, of, like, kind of almost out of her body, which makes me think that they do know what they're doing, that
Mhm.
they really are gonna handle this well. And the third thing, and that this will be the test, right, is, does this become some kind of revenge arc for Cassian? Like, that's I mean, when we use rape in a kind of manipulative way, or in a not a very thoughtful way, it's like, let's give the man a motivation for his action, right? And I hope it just stays part of her story, whatever happens with her. So those are some thoughts that I have about that. I mean, I think that's right on, though, that, um, to portray that and to let it be fully realized, as a part of her character, will be interesting. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
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 So, yeah. All right,
And
what you got?
also,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So one more quick thing. I think also Andor I'm trying to remember. Is it the Bechdel test? That's the one
Ah,
about
yes.
like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. 2
Andor.
women talking about a non-male character. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I think it passes so far.
Ah, yeah.
So
Oh, interesting. Yep, yep, yep.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. At least Mon and Vel. So
Yes,
there's
there
that.
you
So
go.
yeah.
Excellent.
So the one that first thing that I thought of was the very opening scene of the first episode,
Okay.
with this with Cassian, as you know, in infiltrating as this Imperial pilot, and this interaction with this woman who we've not seen before. Her name is
Mhm,
Naya,
mhm.
um, and this interaction between the two. And I remember something somewhere of like that one of the great things to do in telling a story is actually in like the first couple pages to tell you everything you need to know about the story in those first couple pages, but not really clearly saying that. And
Mm,
I feel like in there's this interaction where Naya says, "If I die tonight, was it worth it?" Because
mm,
she's betraying her
mhm.
the Empire,
Yeah.
and she doesn't seem like a believer in the Empire.
Mm,
Like she's just kind of like
mhm.
an employee,
Yeah,
like she's a
yeah.
scientist working on this research project.
Mhm.
And even at one point says, that I've had fun here.
Yeah.
Like, and it's clear she has this friendship with this other officer
Mhm.
who comes in at one point. Like, these are just, they're not, every person in the Empire isn't evil and horrid.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, she's just doing her job,
Yeah,
and she's had fun
yeah.
here. But she says, if I die tonight, was it worth it? And then Cassian says, "You made this decision long ago. The Empire cannot win. You will never feel right unless you're doing what you can to stop them. You are coming
Mm,
home to yourself. You've become more than your fear, and let that protect you."
mm,
Um, so that whole line of you're coming home to yourself, like you're
mm,
finding like this deeper reality of
mhm,
who you are and this deeper humanity. But it got me thinking about within the Christian story, um, the cost of discipleship.
mm,
Like, what is the
mhm,
cost that it takes to, so within the Christian story, to follow Jesus, within this, to be a part of the rebellion and be a part of
right.
fighting this galactic empire. And so, in the Gospels, we have these, you know, multiple teachings of Jesus where, take up your cross and follow me. Foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests,
Love
no one
that.
who puts their hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. And there's several other teachings like that that come from Jesus of like, this is what the cost is. And then there's the
Mhm,
20th century Christian martyr Dietrich Bonhoeffer, whose Cost of
mhm,
Discipleship book has this line, gendered: when Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die.
mm,
And
mhm,
like there is this layer of, whenever like I get into like a study with people about some of that, where it's like, am I really called to that?
right.
Like, how far this goes a little bit to what MaryAnn, you brought up about, um in your first comment,
Mhm.
with Valentina, that is, how far are you willing to go with this?
Right.
Like, what cost are you willing to pay out, to
Mhm.
give
Mhm.
for this bigger work?
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's great.
think about, in the first season, one of the epic speeches in the first season was Luthen's, where
Mhm.
he basically goes through of like everything he's given up of his humanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've become, and the language of something was like, I have basically become what I have beheld to fight what I beheld. Like,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
remember exactly the way I put it, but
Yeah.
essentially it
I'm
was
I'm
that.
determined to use the tools of my enemy against him,
That's
and
it.
other sentiments,
Yeah.
to that effect. Oh, love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, um, Naya asking that question, if I die tonight, was it worth it? And
Mhm.
Cassian doesn't say yes, it absolutely is, but that's kind of in the subtext in there, is like,
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
come to a reality of what you need to be as a human being in this world. The Empire
Mhm.
cannot win, and
Yeah.
you'll never feel right unless you're doing what you can to stop them.
Mm. Wow.
So, that's again that question of how far are we
Mhm.
willing to really
Mhm.
go in
Yeah.
fighting empire, fighting oppression, fighting
Mhm.
injustice, etc.
Yep.
Um,
And yeah, what are we willing to give our lives to,
mhm,
if not for?
mhm.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea that it's all right there in the first scene, which, by the way, I mean, when he's trying to fly that TIE fighter out is just one of the
Hysterical.
funniest things I've ever seen in Star Wars.
So great.
So
And so
good, but
unexpected too. Like I
yeah.
was expecting like phew, and then
Oh,
like
yeah. Well, they
crunch.
always like you sit down and they sit down at a panel, they always know how to fly, whatever they're in.
Mhm.
So it was just so delightful. But that scene, I mean, that exchange is so, so good. And two things that I'm with a bunch of preachers this week, and so we've been talking about various scriptures and things. And two things that have been said this week that connect to what you're saying. One is someone said, we know where God, the most central part of ourselves is where we meet God. Like our most authentic selves. That's where God shows up for us. And so coming home to yourself, it kind of connects to that idea. But also, someone was had done some scripture study around the idea of we are the clay, God is the potter, from the Old Testament, and the most important thing you do with a potter's wheel is to center the clay. Like, if you don't have it centered, you can work with it forever, and it's not gonna create a pot that's really sound. And I guess, as an initial thought to what you're saying about, I mean, coming home to yourself, but also what are we willing to give? I think we can't really answer that question with integrity unless we are completely centered in who God is and God's call for justice and for our own, like, we're each gonna have our own part to play, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so that's a maybe an initial thought to that. I do love that exchange though, and it does the show's so good at humanizing. Yeah, I mean, she's like, I had fun here." I mean,
Mhm.
and my other nugget is not about Dedra and Cyril, but, like, this couple is so intriguing to so many of the people watching the show, as I've read and listened to other people talk about it, is like, these people are terrible, but we just can't. I mean, you can almost root for them. It's just a fascinating people to watch.
Mhm.
And the experience with their Cyril's mother is just so crazy and relatable. But
Yeah.
anyway, all right, well, here's my this one connects to what you're saying about Luthen is, and I'm still thinking about how to kind of, process this and think about it and describe it, but it's kind of the role of, accelerationism. I mean, the idea of we need the empire to overplay its hand because that is what's gonna allow the rebellion to become more robust, because if the oppression is just kind of like the frog boiling in the pot of water, we're all just gonna get used to it, but we need them to clamp down harder in order to rise up this kind of resistance. And that's Luthen's thing, like, you know, he's very much guided in that direction, and I guess I just wanna process that with you in terms of our own Christian ethics, because you know, we've in the last few months, I've been reading a lot, people talk a lot about, you know, people who wanted certain things to happen in certain ways need to, I mean, I've heard this phrase used, like, they just need to touch the stove. Like, you know, um, we can't protect people from the consequences of their actions, whether it's tariffs or deportations or things like that. People need to feel the effect of where this country is, and not that we don't protect the vulnerable, but in order for people to see what many of us feel like is going on, um, we need to let certain things happen. And
Mhm.
I guess I'm just trying to think of, I hope that makes sense because I'm still kind of working it all out myself. But how do we think about that ethically? How do we think about that as people of faith? You can't make someone see what they can't see. On the other hand, it feels like if nothing else, we should be a do no harm, first do no harm, or to minimize harm kind of people. So does
Mhm.
any of that make sense? And I'm just
Yeah,
curious what you think about
yeah,
that.
yeah. So as you were talking about the, hand on the stove, what I was also thinking though is that our job is not to take people's hands and put them on the stove.
Mm,
And a little
mhm.
bit with Luthen, it feels a little bit like that.
Yeah,
That,
yeah, fair.
we're gonna make people feel pain. Like,
Mhm,
and not just knowing that the empire is gonna make people feel pain, but we're gonna make it worse
mhm,
to make
mhm.
people realize this is bad. Like this is
Okay,
really bad.
yeah.
Um, so and by the way, I still want to know what Luthen's motivation is.
Mm,
Like what happened with him? Like
mhm.
what radicalized him? So that's quick
Yep,
side note.
yep.
Um, so yeah, I see our role as, and again, Jesus, people, at least in, Mary and my cases, like we're trying to follow this Jesus guy and how he,
Mhm.
he showed us this way to live
Right.
is I think there is that do no harm, but we also have to
Mhm,
speak truth.
mhm,
And I think that, when we look at the model of Jesus, is he never backed down from when truth needed to be spoken, but he also loved throughout. And his hope and his work was, I want to turn the enemy into a friend.
mhm.
Um, and so, he sat with the Pharisees for dinner, just as he went and sat with the people of another class for dinner.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, he went into the home of a Roman.
Yeah.
Um, he did these things. So um, that to me, as a person of faith, for me, like I see my role is not as the accelerant,
Mhm,
but to be the one who's there for the people who are going to get hurt through
mhm,
this,
mhm.
and to speak in the ways when uh, and act in the ways that I am able to
Yeah.
minimize the harm or
Mhm.
to try to change the direction.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I so that's kind of how I hear
yeah,
that
yeah,
personally.
yeah.
Um,
That's really
yeah.
helpful, because as you're talking, this helping me make the next step, which is Luthen was an accelerationist, and other people paid the price for that. Because I'm thinking, I mean, there are times when Jesus really pushes, I mean, like, he goes what John 11, you know, Lazarus is raised, and he goes back to Jerusalem, and people are like, "You should not go there. Like, they're gonna
Mhm,
come after you if you go to the center of,
mhm,
you know, kind of religious authority." And he's like, "I'm going," you know, and but he's the one who
mhm,
ultimately pays that price. I mean,
mhm,
uh, so that's a little different than we need people to feel some pain, and they're going to feel the pain, and that's going to lead to some good outcomes down the road. And
mhm,
that's why Luthen realizes that he's made a deal with the devil. You know, it's for the greater good, but wow.
mhm.
In the meantime, people are gonna suffer, and
Yeah.
Jesus is, I mean, I'm not a big substitutionary atonement person, like, Jesus paid the price, that's problematic for me, but at least he's willing. I mean, he's like, "I'm not asking anyone to do this, I'm doing it,
Hmm.
for myself."
Hmm.
And then, you're right, take up your cross and all of that is still there, but, it's not like, "Hey, you go do that,"
Hmm.
and I'm gonna keep myself in a safe place, so,
Well,
yeah.
it's interesting, and I know I'm gonna jump briefly to a different TV show here.
Ah,
So, I don't know, Marianne, if you've watched any of The Chosen.
mm-mm,
Okay, so I resisted watching it for a while, long while, because
yeah,
basically I kind of see anything by and large, and especially since I knew some of the theological perspective of the people who are creating it, where I was like, I don't think so.
yeah,
I did finally watch it, and honestly, I've been really pleasantly surprised by it.
mm,
There's some problematic things, without a doubt, and some things that when we watched in a small group here, was kind of like, okay, I'm going to pause it here and be like, okay, this is not, So there was
yeah,
things that, but they really portray Jesus in that. When you talked about that John 11 story, like all the way along, you get this sense of Jesus as being like knowing exactly he is there, he's going to be pushing the buttons. And it's been really interesting for some folks who I don't think had considered the political side of Jesus' work
mm,
to see that this one does really bring that out
wow,
of and so I was really kind of surprised by that.
great.
And when you were talking about that story with John 11 and thinking about Luthen, I mean, Jesus isn't sacrificing people for his cause per se, like
Mhm, right.
Luthen did in the first season.
Yes.
Um, and I'm sure we'll probably see something here, but he is like, no, I'm gonna poke this bear. I'm gonna
Mhm,
go here and I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna and even when there's and it's all made, you know, added to the story, the whole thing of, you know, if someone asks you to carry their pack for 1 mile, you take it two.
mhm.
They actually have a scene where Romans make Jesus and the disciples carry their stuff, and you
Oh,
have
wow.
Jesus saying to the disciples, "No, we're going another mile,"
Mhm.
and they're all
Wow,
like, "Wait, what?"
fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's worth a watch. It's worth a
Oh,
watch,
yeah,
but
alright.
but so
Yeah,
anyway, yeah,
great.
yeah,
Good, alright,
but
send us
I
home.
Yeah, but I
Name?
will
Oh,
say, I
yeah.
wanna know what Luthen's motivation is.
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah, I hope
really
you do.
wanna know.
Yep.
So the other one was for me, and again, it's rooted in that first scene. That first scene just got me. Um, and, um, is that the whole thing is still about people,
Mhm,
and the interaction, Naya says to Andor, "I'm not supposed to look at you." Like, kind of the
mhm.
plausible deniability, like, if she doesn't look
Yeah,
at him, she can't identify him.
mhm. Yeah.
And she's not supposed to ask questions. And Cassian's like, no, you can look at me. You can
Mhm,
ask questions.
mm.
Um, he's not treating her as just an object,
Ah,
or just a part of the mission, but he's like
mhm,
treating her as a human being
mhm.
and honoring her fear that she's got at that moment, because there's a lot. Um, and that, and also like seeing that no, she's not just an evil, worker of the empire.
Yeah.
She's this fairly youngish woman who I had
Mhm.
fun here. And she's maybe
Mhm.
gotten her dream job of being an engineer on creating starfighters. Like, she's been working through the academy to finally get to that point. And it's like, ah.
Right.
Um, and so, even though we started out with me, holding my lightsaber, one of the things about this show is that it's about people all the way along. It's not about, the superhero Jedi. We've seen no force powers in any of the
Right.
episodes.
Mhm.
We've rarely, if at all, heard "May the Force be with you." Like,
Yeah.
rarely.
Mhm.
Um, there's no, force lightning. There's none of these kind of things that are going on. It's real people with real stuff. And I kind of made this list of like each character of like, what is their stuff? What are they holding to? And what are they fighting for? Um, Mon Mothma has, what is she fighting for, and who is she fighting for?
Yeah.
Um, Cassian, Vel, Bix, Lonnie, like Lonnie with the Imperial mole,
Yes.
working in the ISB, he's desperately fearful for his family. And
Mhm.
Luthen is kind of a jerk to him, but
Exploiting that, yeah,
but
yeah,
like, Lonnie's like, I want to care for my kids, like
mhm.
these are real people. And I even thought of like, Cyril, who again, we'll get back to Cyril and Dedra and their fascinating thing that's going on there. Um,
Yes.
but like you can see, like, yeah, he's got some serious mom issues.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
you can see why. And
Yep.
that he's working those out, like, and they're
Mhm.
affecting every part of who. So I love the fact that it's humans.
Yeah,
And even when
yeah.
you get into Rogue One, like it's about human beings.
Yeah,
um
yeah.
and yeah.
I really appreciate that because one of the things that I've worried about, I mean, we know that Rogue One has Cassian and it has Melshi, and those are the only characters that we've met so far. Well, Bail, Mon Mothma, obviously, and I guess Bail Organa will show up. Perhaps there's speculation that he will be in it, but otherwise, God, I hope some of these people have survived and they're just not in that narrative, right?
Hmm.
Because then it becomes. I agree with you. It reminds me. I mean, you and I have never talked about The Last Jedi and how you feel about that movie. I know some of the
Hmm.
fandom is, I think it's
Brilliant.
outstanding. But that beautiful line near the end of, right, like, this is how we win, not by fighting what we hate, but saving what we love. Is Bix going to survive this season? Is B like, have we not seen, or is B2 emo done? Like, are we never going to see him again because he's left on that planet with Talia? You know, and there's many more. It looks like we'll probably meet K2SO, or at least they've shown a droid in the preview that looks like that could be. So yeah, that this is a story about people and we're fighting for people, and that's what it is about. That's what the Jesus movement is about community. It's about people. It's about setting people free. And so I hope that it doesn't just become about Cassian has lost everything and now he has nothing left to lose. And it's really just about, I hope that he's fighting for people, and not just avenging them. Maybe that's
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
going to be watching for in the next
Yeah.
nine episodes.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
only 9. Mm.
I know, my gosh. Oh man. Well, this was fantastically fun.
Yeah.
Hope if those of you joined us, thank you for tagging along on our nerd out, our first, but I think not the last, pop culture pastors hour. And yeah, we'll make those of you who joined us late. We'll put these up on both of our respective pages as a recording. I assume that,
Yeah.
or you
Hmm.
can link to mine, whatever you'd like to
Yep.
do, Ed. But
Yep.
yeah, and we will do this again, I think.
Can we chat
And
on one
yeah,
more thing real quick?
go for it.
Okay.
Go for it.
One of my absolute favorite lines in the whole first thing. So we haven't mentioned Clea at all, who's like Luthen's number
Yes.
2.
Woo.
She's amazing. She
So
is
good.
awesome. I adore her.
Yeah.
But there is the line where um, Luthen says, "What are we looking at?" And she says, "I'm looking for a drink." Just,
Yes.
I laughed so hard at that. Just was
Yes.
like,
Yes.
seems so out of character in one sense for as kind of
Hmm.
buttoned down as she was. Um, but just she is. I really hope we get more of her. Like
Yeah.
she is great.
Yeah.
And
I heard
yeah.
somewhere that this is really this was her first role. I don't know if, like, she'd probably done other stuff, but I mean, can you imagine? She just has nailed it, that actress.
Mhm.
So yeah, can't wait
Yeah.
to see more. Well,
Yeah.
we'll have to stick a pin in this because I do want to talk with you about, at some point, about um Perrin's wedding toast, because I
Hmm.
think there is some real depth there. So let's put that on hold because I bet we're going to find out more about Perrin,
Hmm.
and I am starting to think maybe there's more to him
Yeah.
than we had been led to
And also
believe.
Mon Mothma's, like, letting go at the end.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep. Oh, right, right.
so good.
So let's look at those
Yep.
scenes in retrospect, given wherever they're gonna go next, which I can't wait to see what that is. So,
Yep. All right.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for
Yay.
joining
Thank you
us,
all. Yeah, absolutely.
and may the fourth be with you this Sunday,
That's right.
and we'll
Woohoo.
see you next week to talk about the next arc of the next few episodes. So,
Night. Woohoo. Very excited.
bye.
So, all right. See ya.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.